welcome everyone to our conversation this evening. We're going to have two main conversations about topics that were just mentioned. But first, I'd like to throw out an icebreaker to get us started. And it's the following. What do you personally see in the work on AI that keeps you engaged? What is the promise of AI that makes you excited to research, teach, and lead in this area? Ross, you can go first.
All right. The thing that attracted me as a grad student to AI is very different than it is now. Originally, it was building an amazingly intelligent machine. I was attracted to that vision. Today, it's much more about building technology that helps people be amazing and intelligent and healthy. And I'm super excited about the potential of technology to not only help us give people better health today, but also, for example, it was mentioned in my bio, a wearable that came out of Ming Zerpo's PhD in the Media Lab and a lot of our work commercialized by Empatica, that is out there today detecting generalized tonic-clonic seizures, alerting people for help. And so in a vulnerable moment, when your brain is having this electrical storm and you can't call for help, the AI calls for help. And hopefully somebody comes and checks on you and you'll be fine. You should ask if you know anybody with epilepsy so that you can be there for them and offer to be somebody they call. The AI enables the sophisticated continuous pattern recognition and monitoring of a complex constellation of physiological signals and allows us to separate those from other things that might confuse a very simple system that's not an AI system. So I'm excited about the ability both to help save lives today, but also the promise of large data sets plus AI plus people who are doctors and experts carefully labeling and curating the data. The AI is not doing this on its own. And working to come up with human technology solutions that work better than what we have today, that not only can provide better insight into what a patient needs and better early detection and treatment, but also I think, and I'm super excited about this, prevention. Could we prevent a lot of disease? And I think we might be able to not prevent all of it, but I think there's a lot of it that we could be preventing. In particular, we work a lot on mental health and human flourishing and building resilience with this technology, helping people see their personalized patterns that contribute to their health and help them hopefully prevent falling into depression when the pressures are mounting and other kinds of illness.
I asked Max today what keeps him up at night because him and his wife have recently had a child. And he took out his cell phone and he showed the beautiful picture of his child. So we know what keeps him up at night in terms of his family. But Max, what keeps you up at night worrying about AI? Because you've thought a lot about this. And it's come out in the books, but also in your conversation.
Yeah, I'm kept up at night both by excitement and by nightmares related to AI, actually, because I feel if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the history of science and technology is really a story of human empowerment. Back in the Stone Age, didn't much matter what we did. 2 generations later, the basic things would be the same. We were like a dry leaf blowing around in the wind here in Cambridge without having much agency. Then through science, we realized we had underestimated our ability to understand the world and build technology, and we had also underestimated our ability to have an impact on the world and be good stewards of the world, right? And what keeps me up at night really is I can't shake the feeling that, especially with all this empowerment, we're falling so far short of our potential. And the nightmare part is, of course, that we're using this ever more powerful technology, to bomb the heebie-jeebies out of our fellow humans, in Gaza and elsewhere. We're using it to create all sorts of mental health problems for people here in this country. We are using it to be very reckless with our planet and so on. But on the optimistic side, there is so much potential, again, if we can take this ever more powerful technology and use it wisely. And everything I love about civilization is the product of intelligence, of human intelligence. So if we can amplify that with artificial intelligence, not even the sky is the limit. We should be able to really help humanity flourish, not just for the next election cycle, but for a very long future, and on Earth, maybe even beyond. And I want to. So I spent time awake at night wondering, like, what little things can I do to try to steer the technology towards the little better uses and away from the bad ones.
Great. On that note, we're going to move to our first conversation, which has to do with humanity. There are many ways in which AI and technology have replaced humans. What does being human personally mean to you, and what makes us unique from technology? Does human flourishing, like Mac just said, increase proportionately with innovative achievements, and do technologically more advanced humans have higher value? Let's stay with you, Max, and we'll give the floor over to Roz afterwards.
So you're basically asking what I feel.
Yeah, all in 5 minutes.
Makes us human.
So what's the meaning of the universe? Where do we come from? And you have 5 minutes.
Let's see, which corner of this should we start with here? I think the way I approach this question is, what is it that brings out the best of us, and what is it that brings out the worst of us? I would like, generally, when I interact with other people, to bring out the best in them, to bring out their best humanity, and to inspire them, to help, and et cetera, et cetera. But when you're, whether it's a friend or a child you deal with or a student, that we try to bring out the best of them, and that's kind of what we mean by supporting their humanity. And I think we can take exactly the same lens and look at technology that way. Is the technology we build bringing out the best in us, or is it bringing out the worst in us? Is it bringing out the worst in the sense that we are fundamentally being hacked by our technology, spending hours doom scrolling, instead of being with friends, doing things that we later regret, or is it bringing out the best in us, making us wiser, kinder, better at accomplishing the things that we want to do? And I'm very humble about the fact that I don't know a glib definition ultimately of what's the optimal way for humans to be, but I do feel very deeply that I can tell, at least afterwards, if something brought out the best in me or the worst in me.
Okay, Roz, why don't you touch a little bit on the religious aspect that this may imply? Especially when we talk about human flourishing, one of the domains of human flourishing is, of course, spirituality. So perhaps you could touch on this from the perspective of technology and spirituality.
Yeah, are we allowed to ask each other questions too?
Absolutely,
Can
sure.
I?
Yeah.
Well, not to hijack that, but just the.
Do you want to come back to that in a second?
There are just so many things here. Yeah, I mean, I'll answer you a little bit, and then we can come back to it too. Not to look evasive, like ask the spiritual question, she dodges it. I'm not trying to do that. Actually, the spiritual question is one that I used to not bring up in the MIT classroom because it kind of felt like it didn't fit. I couldn't prove it. It wasn't mathematical. And then I was teaching an AI and well-being course, and I was trying to learn the determinants and things related to well-being. And there's actually incredibly good data, randomized control trials with excellent statistics by people like Tyler Vanderweel at Harvard, who actually got tenure at Harvard for his statistical work. Usually people get tenure somewhere else, and Harvard hires them. Harvard doesn't usually tenure their own people. And it's excellent work, and it showed that there were all kinds of very significant health benefits, mental health and physical health, even if you controlled for physical health at the start of the study, related to regular spiritual practice is what they looked at. And actually, most of the people were Catholics, so you might appreciate that, Catholic nurses. They didn't have MIT professors in the study, But that got my attention, and I asked in some of the other surveys that were done of quality of life and student well-being nationwide, because they never report this in them. And they said, oh yes, in fact, we always find that that's a huge effect. Regular religious practice is a huge effect associated with protective, better mental health and well-being. But we just don't report that. So it's in a lot of the data. For me, when I've been asked, since I build a lot of AI that has social emotional skills, and people are often asking me, like, aren't you building humans? Are you playing God? Are you like building a machine that's gonna just replace us? And I'd love to hear, you've said a lot about technology replacing us, so I want you to address that. We've often been building it to solve a specific problem that we want to solve, to make some part of a system function better, or we might build it to better understand humans. My group and others I know here have not worked to build it to play God. We're actually quite worried about misuse of it, and very interested in how to put the brain power of people like here to the kind of uses that I think are very aligned with what Max was just saying. How do we improve people's lives? How do we honor what it is to be human? And how do we also better understand that if we're to honor it?
Yeah. Max, do you want to address that quickly?
Yeah, with pleasure. I completely agree. With any technology, there are great uses of them and there are bad uses of them. So we shouldn't think of technology as morally good or morally evil. Technology is a tool we can use for good things and bad things, and it's very important to step up and take the moral responsibility as humans and ask, where are the red lines? What are we not going to do with these things? You mentioned people wanting to, sort of alluded to people wanting to build a digital god that's going to, that we might sort of lose control over and whatnot. I mean, for those of you who believe that there already is one benevolent God, why would you want to build a second one that you don't even have any guarantees is going to be benevolent at all? It might be a total psychopath. And for those of you who are not religious, similarly, if we have gotten all this empowerment, why would one want to rush to build something that some of the brightest minds in AI, like Jeff Hinton, think we might actually lose control over? I think to put this in context a little bit and get beyond, the slogans, it's really nice to just put this in a little bit of a historical perspective. We have, first of all, a long tradition as humans of figuring out more and more about how things work. When we figure out more things about our muscles and mechanics and all this stuff, we build machines that are stronger and faster, and then that gave us the Industrial Revolution. So we humans were able to shift away from working with our muscles to working with our brains. And now the same economic incentives, of course, mean that if we can figure out how our brains work, and if we think of our brain as a biological computer and build machines that can do it much cheaper, there's going to be a huge pressure to also replace all our brain work. And if we keep delegating ever more of power to machines, there might be a future where all cool sorts of things happen, but it's not our future necessarily if we sort of lost control over it. And so that's one angle, a sort of economic angle of that leads a lot of people to say we have to be cautious. And the second thing I think is important to remember in the very big picture is there are two completely different kinds of AI that are often conflated with each other. So we had a wonderful dinner here, for example, two grad students using AI for chemistry, someone were looking at machine learning for math. For almost everything, I would say at least 99% of all the uses of AI that people are excited about today do not require anything like building a digital god. They're building tools which help us solve well-defined problems better, maybe curing cancer, maybe doing some other science breakthroughs. That's the vast majority of what people are excited about. I'm very excited about that too. But then there is that last percent. And the original goal of artificial intelligence, the term, when it was coined by McCarthy from MIT, in the 50s, the goal was always to do everything that the human mind could do even better. That was the ultimate goal. Sometimes people call it AGI, sometimes they call it superintelligence now, if it's vastly beyond. But this digital God, this has been the ultimate goal of some people always. And some companies now even have it in their mission statement, like OpenAI has it in its mission statement, DeepMind is trying to do it, Anthropic. And that's not necessary, for getting these 99% benefits most people are excited about. And to me, going way back in time, the ancient Greeks already warned us about hubris. In the story of Icarus, who had figured, he had this fantastic new technology, the wings with which he could do great things. But instead of enjoying that, he had to get that extra last percent and fly too close to the sun, and he ruined it all, right? I think if there's any human wisdom from history we should take with us is, let's not be so greedy and succumb to this unnecessary hubris. If we can get this right, be a little more patient, and figure out how we can make ever more powerful AI that's going to be benevolent and beneficial and keep empowering us rather than overpowering us, then we shouldn't be in any hurry. We can do this for decades, centuries, millennia, giga years. It makes no sense to try to rush and do it in 5 years or 2 years just because otherwise some other company is going to do it first. Yeah. So this is the big picture. I think we have vast majority of things people are excited for AI. Great, let's do it. If I had a magic wand, I would put a moratorium on this building a digital god for at least another 10 years or so until we can understand better even what the risks are. Just chill out a little bit on that. And then we can, in the meantime, figure out all sorts of cancer cures and really reap all these benefits of the quite safe AI that we're all excited about.
So do you want to mention the person who's building the digital god, or would you prefer to leave that ambiguous?
Well, unfortunately, I know many people, even personally, whose companies are trying to do exactly this. But actually, I don't think I need to mention any names, but it's pretty clear when I talk to various CEOs that they're also scared, actually. Yeah. They're very smart people. They went into this for all the right reasons. They want to do good in the world, but they find themselves stuck in a race that they can't get out of, where they realize that if they pause, the only thing that's going to happen is they're going to get overtaken by the other company, and then there's going to be the share board or the shareholders are going to replace them by another CEO who's not going to pause. So I think the more realistic path to a good future here is not to just go tell the CEOs to slow down a little bit. They don't have that power. You can't go to the CEO of a tobacco company and ask them to stop making cigarettes. They're just going to get replaced by a new CEO. The way to do it is the way we do it in all other industries. We have something like the FDA or the FAA, which sets safety standards in place. And so the rules are the same for all the companies. And now instead of it being a race to the bottom, it's a race to the top. Whoever can meet the safety standards first gets to launch their products. And what comes out is safe. This is why you feel so safe when you fly airplanes, for example. And
not Boeing.
Could be worse, though.
Not always.
After the Wright brothers,
politically incorrect.
Those airplanes.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, I'm done. I just wanted to say, to not leave you all doomy and depressed here, because this is a problem we know how to solve politically, putting safety standards in place. It's just that we don't have any for AI because it's so new. The politicians haven't caught up.
Right. So, Roz, let me challenge you on something that Max just said and see if you agree or disagree. They're just tools. They're not good or evil. It's what you do with them.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard this for lots of technologies.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that when we design something, we shouldn't just say, I'm just designing a tool and I don't need to think about that. I think we should be actually exploring. I love exploring with artists and science fiction writers and all, like, how might this be misused? How might this go wrong? How might this be taken in directions I do not want it taken in? I remember some of the early work we did with wearables and people on the autism spectrum, and we involved them in the co-design. And they expressed, even though some of them couldn't speak and they wanted this to help communicate their stress, some of them would type to get a voice and would say, like, I need to be able to take it off in case somebody starts to use it against me, right? I need to have control over it. I need my agency. And in general, we're finding, that agency, that autonomy, staying with humans, especially when machines make mistakes, is a key design principle for this technology. We are still the ones who are best at sensing the context, the changing situation. And maybe it was optimized for this situation, but that's not the current situation. So humans are very good at adjusting to that. In fact, actually, I think I just saw Rod Brooks. I don't know how many of you know Rod, who used to be the head of the computer science AI lab here, very famous roboticist. Rod just issued 3 laws of robotics. Did you see his latest laws? And one of them was making sure agency stay, if I'm paraphrasing it, okay, somebody can look it up, agency stays with humans, especially when the robot makes mistakes, which it will, right? Which reminds me of another thing about what it means to be human. We often, or at least I do, when I make mistakes, I say I'm only human, right? And I'm reminded of my husband likes to say a lot of people at MIT in the early days would say, to err is human. Usually you say to forgive is divine, but here we say to err is human. To really screw it up requires a computer.
Can I just add something to that?
Go ahead, Max.
I completely agree with you, Roz, that even that we have a moral responsibility when we develop a technology to also look at the social implications. We can't just say, oh, that's someone else's department. Absolutely. And indeed, particularly if we're in a situation where other people, where there is no effective regulation at the moment of other things, it's where we can easily foresee how this will be misused if we just give it to everybody. And so I would encourage all of you who are building things to always look yourself in the mirror from time to time and ask, what are the consequences of this? And not just have bystander syndrome and assume that someone else is going to make sure that it's only used for good.
Max, could you share with the audience something that is very dear to your heart, and that's the virtue of humility? It's something that is profound, but you don't hear it very often in the AI sector. So I don't want to pressure you, but I think that the audience would enjoy hearing that insight.
Oh yeah, we could. The AI sector could definitely do with a lot more humility. Yeah. I mean, first of all, yeah. If you look at predictions that very famous AI researchers have made, even quite recently, about the rate of progress, they've been completely wrong. I mean, Rodney Brooks is great. I really admire his work, but he told me less than 10 years ago that he predicted that human-level AI was at least 300 years off, with more than 99% certainty. As recently as 5 years ago, most AI researchers, even in scientific polls, predicted that something as capable as ChatGPT-4 would take decades. And it's already happened, right? So humility, very much in order. And this is something that's been super important to me all along, because to me, if I had to summarize the most important principle of science, of being a scientist, in one word, it would be humility, really. This idea that you have to have such an open mind that we're willing to question all authorities, claim things about stuff. They might all be wrong. We have to think for ourselves, look at the evidence, and the most difficult authority to challenge is my own prejudices, of course. If you take Einstein, for example, people have been asking him for all his life, what's the time? What's the time? What's the time? And he had the humility to ask, what if there is no the time? What if everybody has their own time that runs at different speeds depending on how fast they're moving? And it was that humility that opened his mind to figure out relativity theory and gave us E equals mc squared, which might be generating this electricity here. And so having this humility, though there's so much we don't know, I think it's incredibly important. It's an incredible gift to get to live in this spectacular universe, even more bountiful with resources and so on than we ever thought. And we have to be humble that we really don't know what we're getting into necessarily if we suddenly create technology which is vastly smarter than us. And I think to be good stewards of this gift that we have, that means we should take our time, be wise, deliberate, mindful, and not hubristically just rush into stuff.
Yeah. Ross, do you want to add something to that?
Oh, I'm humbled all the time here at MIT. It seems like every time we seek to learn something and we get an answer, there's 10 new questions that spring up. I have to, if you're a grad student feeling like, when is it ever going to be done? It's never done, right? If you're searching for truth and knowledge, it's infinite. It's very, very humbling here. With Max, though, we definitely, could all probably improve in that practice here. I think it's good that we develop the kinds of ability to have conversations and relationships where people can call each other out and question what's going on.
Yeah.
And in my experience, colleagues really appreciate that. Maybe don't do it publicly. Don't try to make people look bad, but pull them aside and say, hey, it seems like you really believe this, but I'm not sure that fits what I'm seeing. Can you say a little bit more about it? And are you interested in seeing what I'm seeing?
I think humility is one of the key characteristics of a leader in almost any sector. So I think it's fascinating to hear from Max and also Roz the importance of humility. So with that, let's move to our next and final conversation before we open up the session for question and answers. And that has to do with value systems. AI alignment research stems from a fear of existential risk posed by AI and strives to align the goals of AI with the values of humans. Max's organization has studied this extensively, also in conjunction with Nick Brostrom and Anders Sandberg in Oxford. Where do three of them are Swedes, by the way, so I call this my Swedish conspiracy. Wonderful people. Where do your personal values come from? What values would you like to see reflected in the design of AI? Is there sufficient agreement among scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers on the right set of values to imbue into AI systems? And who should decide on the worldview and values that parameterize AI? It's a very complex question, I know, and so we'll start with Max. And please take it as you wish, because we won't be able to answer all of those questions.
All right, so I want to inject some optimism here, because I have many colleagues who get very gloomy and are like, people around the world want so many different things, we can never agree on anything, so we're screwed. I think it's much better than that. The space of artificial minds that you can imagine having is vastly larger than the space of human minds in terms of preferences. You could make machines that could want basically anything, or they could want exactly the opposite of that thing. Whereas all humans virtually want to eat, we want to stay alive, we want to protect children, we want human connection, etc. Yes, there are some things we disagree on. Some people think that you should pray on Fridays. Some people think you should pray on Saturdays. Some people think you should pray on Sundays. Some people you should pray not at all. Disagree with various other things. But those are really, really minor differences compared to the kind of differences you could have between machines or totally weird psychopath machines and most humans. And one of my I'm not a native English speaker, but one of my favorite English expressions is "don't let perfect be the enemy of good." We have, for example, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. things like eliminating poverty, etc. There's a whole bunch of quite ambitious goals. And guess what? The US agrees with China on them, and with Russia, and with Belgium, and with basically the whole world has signed on to these. We're nowhere close to meeting them. So these are really bold challenges. Why don't we start with something really ambitious like this and say, okay, can we have more powerful AI and other tech to try to solve all the sustainable development goals? And then if we can get there, if there's no more poverty, no more hunger, no more war, then we can get down to quibbling more about these more minute details. We should not use the fact that we don't agree on anything as an excuse to not do way, way better than we can today. And I think if you look at it through that lens, it's very clear that we're all so much better off working together on all these things that we do agree on, and having the courage to also articulate, a bold, positive, globally shared vision that we can all collaborate towards, than squabbling about the rest.
Yeah, good point. Roz, you've already touched on the subject of design of AI, and I think that's vitally important. And Max also mentioned we have to be sure that these things don't get out of our hands. So, and they just become autonomous, and they don't even care about us. That's why I like Elon Musk's phrase, which I think he said here at MIT.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that the AIs consider us an interesting part of the universe, which I find fascinating, because you can't give a machine rules because it'll just change the rules. And you can't use a utilitarian system because that only evaluates the ethical nature of the act after it's done. So literally, it will be too late. And so he came up with this phrase, AIs have to consider us as interesting part of the universe. So, Roz, I would ask you to comment more about the set of values that we can imbue into the AI systems. Kind of piggybacking on.
Can I ask you why you say we can't give it rules?
They'll just change the rules. That's what generative AI does. So when an AI comes to a point where it finds our rules impeding its goals, because it'll start making its own goals, it will change the rules.
These are very interesting beliefs. I haven't, so as somebody who started off as a computer architect designing the chips, probably a bit too arrogantly believing, I understood down to, you're a real physicist. I wasn't a real physicist. I just took all my electives in physics, but down to the, electrons and, we didn't have the nanoparticles I could look at back then. But I believe that we are the shapers of that. If I want to shape it to rewrite its rules, I can do that. If I want to shape it to change goals, look up a random number and pull some random goals off the internet, I can do that. If I want to then give it action, the ability to have access to my bank account and spend my money on random goals and start being an agent in the world, well, I would say I should probably have my head examined, right? That would be pretty foolish. Furthermore, it's going to cost a lot of money. Who's going to put the money into that? There's a whole economic side of this. There's not only all of these design systems that we as engineers make in imbuing it with different abilities or disabilities. Usually all of the technology is relatively disabled. Then, we can pull the plug, right? If right now we were to stop working on AI, how many of you have had to, any computer or technology you work, run on its own for more than 15 years, right? Has anybody got a machine that's been running on its own without you having to intervene and fix something? They break. There's all kinds of reasons they break, and we could just design them to have these safety mechanisms. So I don't start with the assumptions that you're asking. I don't know, Max, maybe you do. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think there's quite an interesting middle ground that sort of unifies what both of you said here, actually. I think on one hand, of course, if you build your own microprocessor, you program in everything, you can set the rules, and that's the rules it's going to use, and that's it. but dark and not very well kept secret of things like of large language models, things like ChatGPT, is that they are not, the intelligence there isn't programmed in by people. It's more like it's grown. You have a very simple learning algorithm and then feed it enormous amounts of data, and then you come back and, oh my goodness, it can translate English into Chinese and it can code in Python. I don't know how it did that. And so we actually have very little understanding still of how they work. My MIT research group focuses on something that goes by the nerdy name of mechanistic interpretability, which is exactly looking in under the hood of these systems, trying to figure out what they do, but we don't particularly understand them. What's been happening now is, with these large language models, is sometimes they do something or say something that people don't like, and there's a technique called reinforcement learning with human feedback, where basically they train them to not say those offensive things. That's just like putting lipstick on a pig, as far as I'm concerned, because if you take somebody, for example, who's like a hardcore Nazi, and you just train him to never say anything that reveals his Nazi goals, have you really solved the problem? I don't think so. What you really want is a deep understanding of whether there are any goals in there and what they are, and ensure, in that case, make sure that they're aligned. I think it probably is possible to ultimately solve this problem, but despite a lot of efforts, we certainly aren't there now. And so I think it's paramount that we solve that problem first before we make machine systems powerful enough that we could, lose control over them. And I also just really want to emphasize that what's giving me nightmares, and not just me, but people like Joshua Bengio and Jeff Hinton and so many others in the community, is not today's AI. We're not losing sleep over GPT-4 popping out of the screen and choking us or anything like that. It's tomorrow's AI. It's what we might get in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. I was recently talking to this businessman who, with a very straight face, says that he wants to build, now, not Elon Musk, wants to build 1 billion or maybe 3 billion humanoid robots that are much smarter than people and can make humans completely obsolete on the job market. He wants them to have 2 legs and 2 arms so they can do all the jobs, because our infrastructure is built for biped things, and he wants to own them, of course. And I'm thinking about something what is this guy smoking? What could possibly go wrong here? I think, in other words, the concern about not understanding what, if any, goals machines have is very well placed if we give them more power over humans' lives. But I think you were quite right. Ultimately, this is something nerds like us should and can work on figuring out.
Yeah, we can prevent this.
But we should not unleash things, very agential and things that are way smarter than us, into the world until after we've solved those problems, and we're not there.
Roz, do you want to speak to that kind of delicate question? Who should decide on the worldview and values that we give to AIs?
Yeah, everybody in this room, all people. One of the worries is that our tech economy right now seems to be set up so that, to train the next model, you have to have at least $100 million. And, it's really, academics are saying, we can't afford to do this right now. It's fewer and fewer people who have the resources to do the next versions of these things.
100 billion is what Sam Altman and Microsoft are talking about now for the next big supercomputer.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm way off. Thank you. So this is, and by the way, think about the energy costs. I heard that we're going to be like all the energy used by the country of Sweden or Germany. We're already like there just for training one model. Is that some people here who know this better than I do? And something like just a query, just playing around with ChatGPT, getting using the equivalent of your hot incandescent light bulb being on for an hour or more per query. I mean, it's crazy how non-green these things are. I mean, this is a really bad direction. So I think we need to look at, we need a lot of people who ask good, tough questions about what's happening. And we need to think not only what's possible, but what we want to build to make a better future. And we need to think about something called opportunity costs, right? It's not enough to just like reduce the costs of what you're doing. You need to think, if I were to spend that same amount, that 100 billion, on something else, could I come out with something that I would feel, the world would feel better about, the world would be better because of. And we need a lot of people's input on things like that. It shouldn't be, a few tech-savvy people making these decisions, and yet it often is. We're in the lab programming, and I'm like, okay, I want to get this thing to work. I need to put some parameters in this function. I need to put some data into this to train it. In the early days, we grabbed the data from the people in the lab, which looked mostly like the same people making it, and so it was not at all representative of the world. And now we know we want to be representative of the world. And what's interesting too, since you're a priest, you would appreciate this. I learned that where that value, I think, was first articulated, that all people are equal, is in Genesis. It's in all of us made in the image of God. And that's like a great equalizer, right? And we're seeing, I'm really happy to see this in the AI community today, people even who never read Genesis and don't have any religion, they still are saying they agree with that value, that the technology should be more equitably trained, deployed, used for the benefit of all people equally.
Max.
Unless they own a big company that could just make a lot of money on one slice.
Right.
Okay, and that's one of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So in your recent interview with Lex Friedman, we all know that Max was the first to be interviewed by Lex years ago. There were moments of emotion and part of your personal journey. And here, I think the students would be interested. It says, where do your personal values come from? Without prying too much, do you think you could talk to that?
Yeah, I feel they come very much from people I've had the fortune to meet, and where I felt, this is a trait that I really admire. I want to pay tribute to this trait by trying to be more like that myself. My parents and a number of people I met later in my life just really, really inspired me.
Okay, Roz, would you like to, your own personal
Before
values?
you answer that, can I just
Sure.
applaud something you said there about equal value and so on for humans, because I couldn't agree more. I feel that I'm very strongly against extreme power concentration. I just think it's exactly the antithesis of what you were describing here. And I think that unfortunately we are gradually in the world seeing more and more power concentration in various forms. And if some tiny group of people who've had too much Red Bull to drink, one CEO, was able to suddenly take over the world with some super intelligence. That's the most extreme power concentration that the planet has ever seen, even dwarfing like pharaonic Egypt levels. And if we somehow manage to lose control to this digital god, and it takes control, that's also just completely ridiculous sort of power concentration. I really resonate with what you were saying instead here, that we want to empower, we want democratic empowerment where we have technology that shifts the power back to everybody, so people can individually figure out what they want rather than be told or manipulated into what to do.
Yeah. Go ahead, Roz.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
It's trying to get personal here. The question is,
values.
where do your personal values come from? Again, without prying. This isn't confession, so.
I confess I've never been to confession.
Where's the boot?
My values today come, I'm also influenced by great people around me, but I'd say I'm most inspired and challenged. So this is where the ideals come from. I don't always reach them. In fact, I definitely don't always reach them. They come from reading the Bible, actually. In particular, the words of Jesus. I mean, there's also the 10 Commandments that are a pretty good set of commandments. But the words of Jesus are mind-blowing and incredibly challenging and inspiring. And to the, little bit that I occasionally manage to put them to practice in my own life, they work. They're like incredibly wise, practical advice. Like, skip all the self-help books. Every educated person should have read the best-selling book of all time. And that, like, just if you only have a few minutes, just read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Read the Proverbs. They're packed with wisdom. Read all the words of Jesus. They're humbling. Talk about humbling, powerfully humbling.
Thank you both for sharing somewhat intimate aspects of your life, but I think that the students are interested in that. These are important questions. This is what makes us human. This is what makes us different from the machines. Okay, so we do have a question. I don't know if it was generated by an AI, but we're going to ask our panelists anyway. What makes humans special in the age of AI if machines are as smart as us? So both panelists have addressed this to a certain extent, but Max, let's start with you. What does it even mean that machines are as smart as us?
So the most popular definition of intelligence in the machine learning community is to simply define intelligence as the ability to accomplish goals. And so I don't think that should be taken as a measure of moral value or necessarily anything like that. We humans have been kind of obsessed about that, though. We branded our species as Homo sapiens, the thinking one, the smart one, being so, we're so cool, we're like the smartest on the planet. We can outsmart those Neanderthals and dodo birds and wipe them out, If we were to go ahead and eventually build machines that are way smarter than us, I'm not saying that that's a good idea. And you heard that I think it's a bad idea to do it now, at least without thinking it through very carefully. But if we were to do that, then I think we would really need to rethink what we want it to mean to be special about us. And the only other thing that's very obvious is to call ourselves Homo sentients instead of Homo sapiens, and to really celebrate the subjective experience we have. We don't understand scientifically what it is that causes us to feel, to experience colors, emotions, love, etc. We have no clue whether it feels like anything to be a self-driving car or ChatGPT and so on. And to me, this is certainly something that I very deeply cherish, that I have a subjective experience. It feels like something to me. I have the emotions and so on. And I think this is something, whatever we decide to do with AI, that we really need to take very seriously and cherish. Why is it that we care so much, for example, in religious thought and in moral thought more generally, about not causing suffering? If subjective experience is just BS, like some of my science colleagues think, it's just what's wrong with torture? Why do they want anesthesia during surgery if the subjective experience is just an illusion, like Daniel Dennett says? Well, why not just have some muscle relaxant and maybe tie them down a little bit during surgery? It's all the same, right? So if this is what's really important, then clearly we need to think hard about how can we create positive subjective experiences for our fellow humans and for all the other creatures we share this beautiful planet with.
Can I give you a new question, Roz, or did you want to?
Actually, I'd like to address that,
Okay.
or at least part of that. And I love your comments about consciousness also. There's a tendency to equate intelligence, ability to perform, answering these questions, or some other function with being special. And there are cases where that is special, right? Like getting into MIT is pretty special. Everybody who does well at what you work hard at, there's a specialness to that. But I think there's also a specialness to being human that has nothing to do with intelligence as measured by these ways we tend to measure intelligence these days. And I'll even allow all the multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, music intelligence, athletic intelligence, and all these amazing accomplishments people have. Not to diminish any of them. They're awesome. Go for it, right? But there's also something about just being human that I've come to incredibly value and appreciate, especially in friends who have lost certain abilities over time through disease or whatever, like a friend with advanced MS and her brains, she can't play music like she used to be able to. She complains that her brain doesn't work as well as it used to. And yet, when she called and left me a voicemail the other day, it brightened my day more than so many other brilliant things that happened that day, cool inventions in the lab or whatever. I think we all know from people who hopefully you have the privilege to connect with who aren't, just at students at MIT and Harvard and stuff like that, that there's just something really special about being a human being. And I'm reminded of the story of, some of you may know Peter Singer, the philosopher who's, I haven't met him personally or talked to him lately, but he's well known for being a utilitarian. And he talked about the belief that it was okay to end the life of people who had diminished abilities, whether they were child-born disabled or later in life, if you've got dementia and you're no longer able to be super intelligent or to operate the AI to help you be super intelligent or whatever, that then it would be okay to end your life. That would fit with the philosophy. And in fact, his mom was a big supporter of him and his philosophy and told him that would be okay for him to do for her if she ever was in that situation. And the day came when she was in that situation. And Singer and his sister, as the story goes, talked to her, and she's like, you can follow your philosophy. It's okay. And he could not bring himself to practice what he believed at that point. And whether or not you believe in God and Imago Dei as an image of God, I think we see in all people this thing that I would call Imago Dei. It's something that gives us something beyond functions that we can measure, define, build in a machine, even though these amazing functions so many people have are to be celebrated. They are special, they are gifts, they're awesome. It's just that defining that as what makes us special is myopic.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful story that you just shared with us. But if we can, Max, you jump in too, but here's a question that many have asked, because it tells me how many people have asked this question. And I think it has to do with what Roz was just saying. Are there capabilities that humans have which you believe AI will never be able to achieve? Do you want Max to start?
Let Max start.
Okay,
spoke last.
So this is a controversial topic also among AI researchers. So humility is in order here, and I'm just giving you my own guess. If you define capabilities just in the very empirical way that AI researchers like to do, can you build a robot that can do the dishes? Can you build a machine that can teach my lectures better than I can, etc.? Yeah, then I think there is nothing that AI will not ultimately be able to do if technology just keeps progressing. That's not saying I think that's where we want to go and that direction we want to go to. But I think part of humility is accepting the idea that even though our brains are very capable, there is no law of physics that says that's the most capable information processing system that could be built in our universe. Just like it turned out that there were things that we could do that mice couldn't do. You know, the mouse wasn't the smartest thing ever. I don't think that we are either. But there are some other AI researchers who are pretty convinced that for various reasons it's impossible, and they tend to be the ones that worry less.
Do you want a new question or?
I can't say never because I just think as a scientist and engineer, we have to keep open to the possibilities of whole new capabilities that we don't know about. And with current methods, just sort of writing that large language model train and adding multiple modalities and more data and more billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't think we're going to solve, I might be wrong, I don't think we're going to achieve real consciousness. I don't think we're going to achieve real life. I don't think we're going to achieve real feelings in the complete sense. We can achieve the illusion of them. We can achieve simulations that if you put it through some well-defined tests, it could start to look like it does, but it's not, it's not a living, breathing, conscious, moral being made in the image of God. It might be made imago Max. It might be imago Ras, right? It might be imago these humano, right?
But you touch on this in your book.
Yeah, I think those are
Life 3.0.
great points made there. I think a nice analogy to make here is if you're just looking at the capability to accomplish goals, like outsmart us on the stock market or outcompete us in academia or whatever. If you make the analogy with instead of thought, think of flight. For a long time, people figured we would never be able to figure out how to build flying machines until after we figured out how to build a mechanical bird that could do everything a bird could do. It turned out that the people finally built the mechanical bird. You can see a TED Talk. It was a German team, a few years ago. But the Wright brothers built the flying machine 100 years earlier already, because it turned out that if all you cared about was the flight, not all the other things that a bird did, there was a much easier way. And that's why when you traveled to MIT from afar, none of you came on a bird, I suspect. You used the simpler technologies. And my guess is, similarly, the first machines that can outthink us for all sorts of for economically valuable tasks will not look anything like the human mind, which means they'll lack so many of these other qualities that we really cherish, but that doesn't mean they won't outcompete us. Right? And sort of by definition, being good at chess means you will get your way and the opponent won't, right? Similarly, if someone just tries to outcompete us on the job market or conquer or whatever, we will be up against some really alien sort of machine, like the airplane analogy of something that thinks. And we'll just notice we keep losing whatever we do, and it's not so. In short, we shouldn't let this lull us into a false sense of security that just because we don't understand ourselves, we can't be outcompeted.
One of my students used AI to buy stocks in NVIDIA a month ago.
Should have bought it a year ago.
Yeah. Boy, I tell you.
5 years ago.
Yes.
No, you could become a millionaire overnight. Because if you track these things, some people knew that NVIDIA was going to become the largest market capitalization of all the companies. I believe it's second now, but still, it's... Okay, Roz, here's one that a lot of people are asking. I don't know if there's an answer to this, but just like almost everything we've talked about, do you think one day AI will demand its rights to be equal to humans?
I used to talk to John McCarthy and Marvin Minsky about this, and they would say, John McCarthy is the guy who coined the term artificial intelligence, and Marvin was a colleague here for years who used to say, we want to build an AI so powerful that we'll be lucky if it keeps us around as household pets. And so, and when I started affective computing with computers having skills of emotional intelligence to move, interact better with people, And by the way, these AIs are nowhere near having real skills of emotional intelligence, although some of them are excellent at sounding empathetic. It's fake empathy.
They simulate.
So I actually kind of liked their answer. Their answer was, when we get to where the robots are asking for rights, and the robots are the robots' rights activists and running around and asking for rights, then we can deal with it then. Although it occurs to me that it would be very easy for MIT people now to take those 100 robots, or even a smaller number, and activate the illusion of that, right? It's very easy to make a machine look like it has these capabilities and to run around and fool the public and say, I need rights. And in fact, there was already a robot that got rights in Saudi Arabia. The Sophia robot was given, I think it was citizenship, which upset a lot of women in Saudi Arabia because this robot was kind of instantly given sort of a better position. It was a publicity stunt by the company making it, but it was...
Was that Hansen?
Hansen Robotics.
Yes, David Hansen. And it's, at the end of the day, he collects what at the time was a $50,000 speaker fee for Sophia, collects it for David, puts Sophia in a box, in the cargo on the airplane. So much for the robot rights. So I think we have to, don't be deceived, right? If the robot or the agent starts tugging on your heartstrings about how it should have rights, look at who is benefiting financially from that. And odds are there's a human name on that bank account.
Follow the money.
We have to wind down our Q&A, but there is one, I think, which is very pertinent because we're at MIT. And so my final question will be the following. Many seem to believe all the power for determining what future AI will look like falls to large corporations or to the government, or follow the money. Yet MIT researchers are builders. They create new technologies regularly that have the potential to influence. How can researchers at MIT make a difference in the future of AI?
That's a great question. Do you want to go first?
Who wants to?
Yeah, how many of you here build AI? Yay, awesome. How many of you have no clue how it works? Not that many. We need all of you to shape the future of it. And I would say if you're a builder of it, question what you're building. We need you to take your brilliance and innovate things that hopefully make the world better. So ask if what your lab is doing is helping really make things better. And question your advisor, question the postdocs, question the people funding the work. I know that's a little hard if you don't have funding. Learn to be really nice. You could actually use ChatGPT to help you make your question sound a little nicer. That's a good use of it. But I would urge you to ask questions and shape it to be better. All of you have a chance to shape it to be better. So take it. Even if you don't know how to build it, ask the people who are building it. Ask the people who are buying it. Ask the people who are talking about it what would make it better. Because a lot of people are just trying to get a thesis, a paper, something on their resume, a job, a salary. They're not actually asking the big question, and then they're becoming a part of the problem, not the solution.
Completely agree. And just to add a little more to that, Upton Sinclair once quipped that it's hard to make someone understand something when their paycheck depends on them not understanding it. So try to persuade a tobacco CEO, or for that matter, someone who's the CEO of an AGI company, maybe they should slow down a little bit. So that gives you a huge advantage because you are here working in an academic environment. Your paycheck actually does not depend on you falling in line with what the shareholders think of your corporation, right? And we've seen time and again MIT researchers really heeding this call. For example, physicists, after being very involved with building the nuclear bomb, at MIT actually founded the Union of Concerned Scientists that works to this day in Cambridge, advocating for responsible use of nuclear technologies to reduce the risk of nuclear war, reduce improve reactor safety. The chemists have gotten very involved in working, talking about climate change. During the Vietnam War, there was a huge group of faculty and students here at MIT who felt it was very uncool, some of the military research being done in MIT, which was causing massive civilian harm in Vietnam, and actually managed to make enough noise that the MIT corporation decided to move all the military research off of campus to Lincoln Lab. So don't underestimate the power you have, especially collectively, from speaking up. And when you do that, MIT has a lot of clout in the global marketplace of ideas. So if there's things that are done with your work or things that you see more clearly because you're an expert in it, don't be afraid to raise your voice. Team up with others here. Maybe you can even get MIT itself to take a stand, speaking up in the halls of power to do the right thing. Don't be the one. Tonight, I just proved to you how terrible at singing I am. So raise your hand if you know Tom Lehrer. Yeah, so I had the great honor of meeting him a couple of times, and he has this song where he's making fun of Werner von Braun, who, of course, built missiles for Hitler and then was moved to the US and started building rockets for it. So Tom Lehrer sings, "Once the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department," says Werner von Braun. So don't be like that.
What gives you hope? What do you do when you feel like you can't stand to be around all the people you're around or around all the technologies you're around anymore?
One of the things that gives me hope is, since changing from an atheist to somebody who believes in God, I believe the God that is beyond all time and space and greater than any God I used to disbelieve in, the mind-blowing one beyond our wildest imagination of all science and knowledge. That God can fix whatever we screw up. So whatever we mess up, that God can make all things new. And it's been revealed to us that God loves us, not just Christians and Jews and people who profess to believe in God, but loves all people. So that gives me great hope. God can make all things new.
Great.
What about you?
Well, as a Catholic priest, kind of predictable, I think. I believe that there is a plan that God has for us, and that we are trying our best to fulfill that plan. Sometimes we don't live up to it. Most of the time, I think we do. And that his plan is part of AI development. And so let's trust him. If we came up with this technology, it's partly because he wanted that. He foresees everything, and he has a plan for humanity, and that gives me great optimism. Second thing is, it seems to be in the nature, and Max can talk to this more than myself, but it seems to be in the nature of the relationship between human beings and technologies that we use them for our own benefit. It takes time. Sometimes we get all excited and we use these things and we're not looking at the consequences. But as time goes on, the tendency that I see is that we use them for our own benefit and not for our own demise. That gives me hope.
Great. I guess I'll tell you two things that give me hope, a long version and a very short one. The long version is, regardless of whether God has there's the divine plan or whether we have to make our own plan, either way, it's incredibly important that we make the right choices, right? And it's very easy to feel depressed and powerless when we live on a planet with 8 billion people and so much stuff seems to be going wrong all the time, and you see people try and fail, and like, what difference does it make what I do? And I think it's very important to resist this temptation to not try. at a very personal level, 10 years ago, I felt it was really, really important to start having a healthy conversation about AI safety and AI risk. I wanted to organize, I created this organization you mentioned, and wanted to organize the first ever conference where you got world-leading AI researchers come together with those who worried to talk not just about how to make more money, but how to actually make this safe. And people told me, oh, get lost, Max, you're such a pathetic dreamer. You know, if AI researchers want a conference, they'll organize it themselves. Thank you very much. You know, go away. But we did it, and it was very successful. Much more recently, I felt we needed to mainstream the conversation about actually pressing the pause button on the most risky kind of AI. People said, oh, forget it. Nobody's going to pay attention. We did it. And suddenly, after we did the open letter, there's been a huge discussion about it, right? And what did I learn from this? Something that really gives me hope. That the reason that just a small ragtag group of nerds, you know, like me and my wife and a few others were able to make a difference wasn't because we were particularly great or anything. It was just because actually there was a giant bystander effect. Nobody realized that nobody else was even really trying very hard. And suddenly you realize that if you just actually use your brain and try really hard, you know, a small number of people can make a huge difference. That's the long one. The short one I want to leave you with is intelligence itself, as I said, is really given us everything I love about human civilization. That's why life expectancy is no longer 29. That's why you can live so much more inspiring lives than our ancestors could, right? And so obviously, if we can empower ourselves with AI, if we can proceed wisely and make AI that empowers us rather than overpowers us, that complements us rather than replaces us, that enables us to solve all these problems that have so far stumped us, right? Huge hope. That can enable us to build a more inspiring future than our ancestors had dreamed of in their wildest dreams. So this gives me hope.
Thank you so much for not letting me ask a question about hope and then not have it answered. That would have been very grim. So thank you guys for keeping an eye out for that. And thank you again once more for the speakers, and thank you everyone for coming.